Let's discuss this further. I'm joined now by a parasite expert, Judi Allen, Professor of Immunobiology at the University of Manchester, who also has a PhD in parasitology, to learn more about parasites and what they can do. I was going to say for us, but no, it's what they do to us, really, isn't it, Judi?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, so first off, when you must have been riveted reading this story when it first broke, because this is your field of work. What went through your mind?
Oh well, it just the story went around all my colleagues. It was good fun. We love these parasites. We actually think they're quite beautiful.
Are you being serious?
I'm perfectly serious.
What's beautiful about a parasite?
Well, they have what we call they dance, they move, they're large, but I admit they are not everybody's cup of tea.
Okay, is a parasite in a human body always a negative thing?
No, actually not. It wasn't. I would say that, one thing to keep in mind is that almost a third of the human population is infected with these parasites, in particular
Judi.
roundworms. Yeah. And that in some cases, because they interact with our immune system in such a way that they don't want to get rejected, that suppression of our immune system can help us avoid allergies and other things. So lots of people think having them is good for us, although I would argue overall they are definitely not good for us. And definitely you want to get rid of them if you have them.
So they're clever little things, aren't they? Try and hide in, well, not quite plain sight, but...
You're very much in plain sight, yes.
Okay, why don't you want one in your body?
Well, as I said, when it comes to the parasitic, they're not that dangerous. But when you have that many people infected, say 2 billion, then even a small number of having serious infection is going to be an issue. So when you think in mind that 2 billion people are infected with intestinal worms, these can then compete for nutrients. They inhibit childhood growth and development. And actually, if you have enough worms, they can actually block the intestines. And then I think much more relevant to the story of the woman in Australia, some of these parasites migrate through the tissues and they can cause a lot of physical damage. It's really kind of a numbers game. If you have a few, you kind of deal with it, repair it. But if you have too many, then you can't cope with it.
Okay.
So if even,
Sorry, we'll get on to how to make sure you don't get them or get rid of them in a moment. But which ones don't you want in your body? I mean, this particular worm, this 8-centimetre worm, I can't even begin to pronounce the Latin name for it.
Yeah.
But this was found on the skin of a python. Normally, it's the python that plays host to this particular ringworm. How would it have gotten to the woman?
Well, so actually it's quite a typical kind of life cycle, actually. So this is actually a roundworm that lives inside the python, is my understanding. And the python poops just like any animal. And then what normally happens is the eggs that are from the parasite get eaten by little marsupials and mammals, right? And then those larvae migrate around migrate in those small mammals, and then the python eats them. And that keeps the whole life cycle going. That woman was an accidental host. And I think that is some of the most dangerous human infections are when you are an accidental host. The parasite gets in you, it's not in the right place, doesn't know where it's going, gets kind of lost and migrates around. And then that can be very, very dangerous, which is obviously what happened in that case. It was that worm didn't want to be there, and it was unlikely she was going to be eaten by a python.
What's I don't know if you want to say craziest, most dangerous, most surprising parasite you've ever come across within a human host?
Well, I tend to think as a scientist on the bigger picture. Me personally, not too many. I've seen lots that are ones that don't necessarily cause such terrible diseases, but I think the one that people get very scared about are tapeworms, because somewhat actually very analogous to what happened with this woman. The larval stages of those parasites can migrate into the brain and cause something called neurocysticercosis. So actually very related to although it's a very different parasite, the tapeworm, than this roundworm that she was infected with. But when you get something that large in the brain, it's definitely not a good thing.
Okay, you get many people who travel, who return back with amoebas. What are they?
Okay, an amoeba is not a parasitic worm at all. An amoeba is a protozoan. So when people talk about parasites, typically medically, there's two very different kinds. One are these worms that we've just been talking about, which are multicellular, as you've heard, very large, can be very large animals that you see with the naked eye. Amoeba are single-celled organisms. They're single-celled organisms, like a malaria parasite is a single-celled organism. And the big difference is that they grow inside your body, like a bacteria would grow. So an amoeba or a malaria parasite, it gets inside your body and it divides and it grows, and that's very dangerous. Whereas these worms, they're animals, they come in, they might mate and make babies inside your body, but they don't actually multiply and divide. So they're really very, very different kinds of parasites.
Judi, how do you avoid playing host to one of these little,
Well, to be honest, keeping in mind that we don't really have a problem in the UK with this, a number of things. So in some cases, many of these are vector transmitted. We just don't have it, like the mosquito, for example, or hygiene. So the parasite that I grew up in a place where these parasites were everywhere, and I was never allowed to go barefoot in the grass because the parasites come out of the poop of people who have, in an unclean environment, and then they burrow through your skin and into your bloodstream and get in that way. So hygiene is just a big aspect, and probably one of the most common, actually, once again, phylogenetically, to use that word, related to what this Australian woman had, are these ascaris worms that you get from drinking just dirty water, where the eggs are in there. Once again, fecal oral, as they call it, getting it from just lack of hygiene. So hygiene, lack of vectors. So the other thing to keep in mind, if you're talking about worms, is that if you're traveling and you get a few, as I said earlier, it's a numbers game. You're going to be fine. It's if you get repeatedly exposed and you get more and more and build up. So these kinds